Jack felt something was wrong with his stepmother's porridge, so he put it up to his nose and sniffed it suspiciously. He smelled something unexplainable. He immediately realized that there was something wrong with the porridge. He jumped out of bed. He tried to find traces of something in the porridge. Still no luck. He had to get a box out of the cupboard. He poured all the porridge into the box. He called a friend to meet him immediately, but as he ran downstairs to leave the house, he was suddenly stopped by his stepmother in the kitchen. It turned out to be the water that had seeped out of his backpack. His stepmother saw it. She wanted to help him wipe his backpack, but Jack was so nervous he couldn't speak. He turned and left in a hurry. His stepmother didn't know what was going on when she knelt down to wipe the floor, but it wasn't water that was dripping on the floor. The stepmother seemed to understand everything. Jack turned around and went to his appointment to ask a friend to help him go to a testing facility to test his stepmother's porridge for drugs. Jack has always had mental health problems. Not only did his friend not believe his assumptions, he also advised him not to suspect his stepmother. Jack ended up shouting and screaming in anger. He scares the hell out of his friend too. In the evening, his stepmother cooks a nice dinner, but Jack doesn't move his chopsticks. His father knew that Jack had a problem with his stepmother. He tried to persuade him to eat, but then Jack made a strange request. He thought he had too much fat on his plate. He was about to switch plates with his father. The stepmother, who had seen all this, finally spoke up with some displeasure. She said that the steak for Danny was medium rare, and his father's steak was medium rare.
What's the big deal?
Stepmother finally says that she has had enough of Jack's nonsense. The father saw this scene. He tried to talk them out of fighting at the dinner table, but Jack picked up his plate and went into the kitchen in a fury. He immediately filled his plate with food and tried to take it to the testing facility to prove that his stepmother had been drugging him. Jack saw his father trying to stop him. He grabbed a knife from the table, warning his father to stay away from him, and as Jack and his father confronted each other, his stepmother was afraid that Jack would do something stupid. She took out her mobile phone and called the police. At this point, John also advised Jack.
She's a killer! First Mom, then Chester, then me, then you, and I'm gonna prove it!
There's no reason for her to have drugged you. Jack rushed into his stepmother's room. He locked the door from the inside. Then, as he searched the room for evidence, his father slammed the door open. He came in and started to try to convince Jack to calm down, but then his stepmother appeared out of nowhere. Jack went crazy again. That's when the police were called. They arrested Jack on the spot. So why did Jack have to go to this length with his stepmother? A short time ago, Jack's mother became terminally ill. They also hired the hospice nurse who is now Jack's stepmother. At that time his mother's condition was still stable, but since hiring this nurse, his mother's condition deteriorated dramatically. It wasn't long before she passed away. What Jack didn't expect was, he also found out that his father had been hanging out with the nurse. In a fit of rage, he confronted his father in front of his brother, but his good brother respects his father's choice, and so, the father became more reckless. He asked the nurse to move in with them. At first Jack hated the stepmother. He made things difficult for her, even when he was with his friends. It was like he was obsessed, always speculating about his stepmother in a bad way. Then his friend couldn't stand it anymore. After some realistic advice, Jack finally realized that what he was doing was probably not right. So he found a way to show his stepmother kindness and—
This is, it's good.
I'm glad.
As they continued to talk, there was a sudden barking from outside. It was time to walk the dog. Jack was about to get up to walk the dog, but his stepmother stops him on the spot. She volunteered to go herself. In the meantime, Dad had finished his work and came out for dinner. Jack had just finished saying that his stepmother's food was good. His stomach suddenly ached. Before he knew what was happening, outside, his stepmother suddenly screamed for help. They rushed out to see. They found that the dog that his stepmother had taken out had been hit by a car and killed.
You did this. You killed her.
But that's enough.
Like you killed my mom.
Danny, no.
Seeing Jack's stomach start to hurt again, his father rushed him to the hospital for tests. But when the blood tests came back, they found that his body was normal. Jack didn't think it was possible. He started to argue with his father in an emotional state. As a result, his father reveals something that makes Jack desperate. Jack's mother's brother hadn't drowned by accident. Instead, he had jumped into the lake with schizophrenia. His father thinks that Jack may have inherited it, but just as Jack begins to doubt himself and lock himself in the house, then his stepmother brings him a bowl of oatmeal and the scene from the first episode occurs. Jack ends up stabbing his stepmother and is taken into custody. The father then hired a lawyer at his expense. Jack was persuaded to apply for a psychiatric evaluation. It was the only way to keep him out of jail, but Jack is still convinced he's not sick. As he tried to refuse the lawyer, John walked in and forced him to have a psychiatric evaluation. Otherwise John had to testify against Jack in court. And that was it. Jack had to follow his lawyer's advice. With the help of his family and stepmother, he managed to avoid a jail sentence. 6 months went by. That day, his stepmother, who had recovered, suddenly came to visit Jack in the mental hospital. When Jack still refused to talk to her, after a lot of words of concern from his stepmother, she suddenly changed the subject and said his father had died of a heart attack on his honeymoon, and that John had developed a severe stomachache. He would never be able to come and visit Jack again.
You
No.
Don't worry, Danny. You're safe here.